Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the great Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism, exposing the hypocrisy in political leaders, and slowly but surely draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. We are so thrilled to be with you today. We're so honored that you would have us with you for part of your day. We're only here because of your prayers, your encouragement, and your financial support. If you're looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We would also really appreciate it if you'd help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. Don't forget, we're also on YouTube when they're not censoring us or suspending our channel, or when we're self-censoring so we don't get kicked off of YouTube. But we're always on Rumble because Rumble lets us say whatever we want, and we love that about them. The links to those are over in the show notes and on freedomstate.us. Moms for Liberty East Baton Rouge Parish Chapter is dedicated to fighting for the survival of America by unifying, educating, and empowering parents to defend and take back their parental rights at all levels of government. To learn more or to get involved with Moms for Liberty East Baton Rouge, email momsforlibertybatonrouge@gmail.com. That's moms, the number 4, libertybatonrouge@gmail.com. The email address is on the Patriot page of our website, freedomstate.us, and it's in the show notes. Well, today's episode is the final one in the series, believe it or not, the wrap-up series of this session, and it is dedicated solely to the bills related to our elections. Before we get into it, let me read the scripture of the day. It is Matthew chapter 12, verse 33, and it says, "You must determine if a tree is good or rotten. You can recognize good trees by their delicious fruit, but if you find rotten fruit, you can be certain that the tree is rotten. The fruit defines the tree." And this is a passage that's been on my mind a lot lately because these are days that require a higher level of discernment. The enemy is working overtime to try and distract and destroy and draw many people off course. In this scripture, Jesus gives us a key to discernment for who to trust, who to partner with, who to confide in, and that is to look at what they're producing. Are they producing drama and strife? Are they producing division and destruction? Or are they producing insights and positive results? Are they producing unity, bringing encouragement, and moving things forward? The Bible tells us in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. Here's what it says in the Passion Translation. Don't continue to team up with unbelievers in mismatched alliances. For what partnership is there between righteousness and rebellion? Who could mingle light with darkness? Now let's refer back to Matthew 12. Who are believers? We don't know believers by their words like I'm a believer. No, we know them by their fruit, what they are producing. We all need to be busy about the work that the Lord has called us to do. We don't need to waste time and energy being in partnership with people who will tear everything down. Ask the Lord for greater discernment and start taking an honest look at the friendships and partnerships that you already have or may be considering. Ask yourself, what is their fruit?
You know, Danielle, we are so lucky to have people surrounding us and groups surrounding us who are bearing such great fruit, people who have brought so much fruit to our efforts and have contributed to our efforts. It is extraordinary how God brings good people together, sincerely motivated by a love of our state and of our country, to simply return our government to the citizens and to make the citizens know and feel that they have a voice in their government. And that's what this is all about. And so you're exactly right. You discern someone's effectiveness by the fruit that they put forward. And you and I could spend a whole show talking about the all of the wonderful people who have come into our lives, who have contributed to LACAG, to the State of Freedom, who have helped advance us and get us to the point where we are now. And God has been so good and just so richly rich in the way that he has blessed our efforts with all of the people who we've come in contact with.
You're so right. And I think this, what the scripture kind of brought to the fore for me is that this is a time where we should be as innocent as doves, but as wise as serpents. We need to be grateful for the people that God's brought into our life who are helping us move the ball forward. And we also need to just be aware and be discerning that not everybody in the state, not everybody in our orbit is necessarily has the same intention. So God will show us that, right? Like we don't have to live paranoid. We don't have to be stressed out about it, but it's just an awareness. It's an awareness that the people who are working with us, the people who are moving the ball forward, are people who are producing good fruit.
And a recognition, Danielle, that not everybody who approaches us, not everyone who purports to be working in alliance with us, with other groups, always is. Because
Yeah.
there is evil in the world. It does exist. And we have a responsibility to discern it and to ensure that we avoid it and that we, are moving forward in alliance with those who have common interests. And that's all there is that we need to be focused on. And as you said, God will always reveal it to us if we stay focused on him.
Yeah, so true. But maybe, Chris, we should get into the election bills.
Let's get into these election bills today because we've had people help us work on these, and some good, some bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I love the fact that we're doing an episode strictly related to the election bills, and we're going to do a sort of a deep analysis as is appropriate on all of these bills. I think there are about 11 or 12 of them, Danielle.
Yeah, and as Katie likes to remind us, Chris, the reason we're dedicating an entire show to this is because if we get elections right, if we can get the elections fixed in our state, everything else we can stand to win. But if we lose the elections and we can't trust that our election results are faithful to the will of the people, then we've lost the republic. There is no other issue that matters after that.
Nothing else matters. It doesn't matter what you do, what you promote, what the will of the people is. If we cannot rest assured that those wishes and those desires are reflected reliably at the polls in our election system. You're exactly right. This is most fundamental.
Yeah. All right. Well, the first bill is House Bill 763 by Representative Bo Beaulieu. He came on the show and talked about this one very passionately. He called it his Biden Bucks bill. It tells the federal government to keep their money, their ideas, and their directives out of Louisiana elections.
I love the fact that any federal directive as it relates to elections, any federal money that the feds want to invest in Louisiana elections, before any recommendation can be implemented or any of that federal money can be spent by the Secretary of State or any other election official, it requires approval by both the House Governmental Affairs Committee and the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee, a vote on that before it can be implemented. So it will be screened and studied and reviewed by our legislature. And if they do not take any action within 30 days, if those committees don't take any action within 30 days, then the directives can be implemented and the money can be invested and spent. But I would suspect that in light of everything that has occurred, in light of some of the things that Representative Beaulieu said on our show, that the House Governmental Affairs Committee and the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee will be looking very closely at any federal directives related to our elections and any money proposed to be spent here. So I think this is a very, very good bill that will impose some real checks and balances. And you know what, Danielle? The citizens can hold our legislature, House Governmental Affairs, Senate Governmental Affairs, accountable for the extent to which they actually review these directives and these money proposals to make sure that they really are in the best interest of Louisiana voters.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris, and it passed House and Government Affairs in 11-0 vote. It passed the House 79-25, with 7 Democrats joining Republicans in favor of asserting state sovereignty over our elections. The Democrats that joined were Roy Adams, Delisha Boyd, Chad Brown, Marcus Bryant, Robbie Carter, Timmy Chassaw, and Alonzo Knox. Republican Jeremy Lacombe was notably absent for yet another important vote. It passed the Senate 28-6, with Democratic Senators Katrina Jackson Andrews and Jay Luno joining in support. It was signed by Governor Landry on June 11th and became effective that day. And as you and I were saying before we came on the show, I would have really loved to see this bill play out a little bit differently. I would have loved it if there's no action taken, the money doesn't get spent, rather than if there's no action taken, the Secretary of State does get to spend the money. But I know they needed to make it palatable to not get a lot of flack from from her office, and a lot of pushback from other who knows what forces that come in and weigh in on these things. So kudos to Representative Beaulieu for getting this through. It's a very important bill, and I think that we will be just keeping pressure on the House and Senate Governmental Affairs committees to make sure that they are vigilant and doing their job in the off season.
And I really believe, Danielle, that this really is the election counterpart to Representative Presley's SB 133 regarding the WHO. That this will provide some real legislative oversight before we just accept federal money and implement federal election directives in Louisiana. Quite frankly, I don't trust what the federal government does when it comes to our elections, and I think that Representative Beaulieu, that's really the motive why he pushed this legislation and why our governor signed it.
Yep. And also, it's a very nice companion, as Representative Beaulieu pointed out when he was on the show, to then Representative Miguez's bill from last session, his Zuckerbucks bill that banned money coming from the likes of Facebook Foundation and, the Chan Foundation or whatever, all these external organizations that seem to have a whole lot of interest in our politics.
Yes, I think Representative Miguez's bill was so important to keep the private NGO money from flowing into the election coffers of election officials. As you know, that became a constitutional amendment, Danielle,
That's right.
Which was passed handily. So between that bill and this bill, I think that we're going to have some real protections.
Yeah. All right, next up, Senate Bill 226 by Senator Heather Cloud, and this one tightened up rules around challenges to mail-in absentee ballots.
Absentee ballots and early voting ballots. If you send in an absentee ballot, early voting ballot, and if there's a deficiency in the certificate, any kind of a material deficiency as outlined in other parts of our law, then it has to be rejected if it's not cured by the voter within a certain period of time. So they are going to be keeping a pretty close eye on the integrity of these absentee and early voting ballots, looking at these certificates to make sure that they're in line with law and that they're in fact, honest and can be accepted as honest. And so I think that's a good bill as far as it goes, SB 226. And I'm glad that we were able to get that through.
Yeah, and a couple notes on this one, Chris. The first note is there are not that many mail-in absentee ballots in Louisiana. I believe the restrictions are pretty tight around who can receive a mail-in absentee ballot. Most people who do early voting have to do it in person. So we're not looking at a huge number of ballots when it comes to absentee ballots, if I'm not mistaken on that. The other point I wanted to raise is that many of you may have seen that Secretary of State Nancy Landry put out, I guess, maybe a press release. It's been picked up in a couple of articles that she had a package of election-related bills that she was touting as big wins for her office this session. And this was one that she included in that list of bills that she was proud of. And we're going to kind of flag those for you as we go through the episode today. We didn't cover all the same ones that she was focused on, but we'll make sure and let you know which ones her office had eyes on or had a part to play in. And this bill really had hardly any opposition. Seems it passed Senate and Governmental Affairs in a 6-3 vote on party lines. It made it through the Senate in a 28-9 vote on party lines. No opposition in House and Governmental Affairs, and it passed the House on party lines with our friend Roy Adams joining the Republicans in support of the bill. It was signed by Governor Landry, and it becomes effective on August 1st.
Still got to have Roy on the show.
Yeah, we need to get in touch with him. All right, next up, a pair of bills by Senator Klein Peter. The first one is Senate Bill 155, and it says that basically it outlines the parameters for who can help a voter in need of physical assistance with their mail-in absentee ballot.
Yes, and it says that only an immediate family member can assist in or witness the certification of an absentee ballot by mail. Any more than one. Now, an individual can do it. Any individual can do this for one ballot, but any more than one ballot for a family member or other family members, it has to be an immediate family member that assists in the certification process for an absentee by mail voter. And I think that's very important because I think that this is going to be an effort to eliminate, again, a lot of these third party groups that really do prey upon vulnerable voters to get them to apply to vote, to certify their absentee ballots, and really to pressure them to vote for the candidate that they want them to vote for, which is the whole purpose of it. This will significantly limit that by requiring immediate family members to participate in this process fundamentally.
Yeah, when you think about this, you think about ballot harvesting, absentee ballot harvesting at retirement homes or nursing homes where people's relatives in the past have not needed to be involved in the process. So a group could just come through and perhaps pick up those ballots as, an act of good service to those voters when in fact, maybe their purposes were somewhat untoward.
They are not there, Danielle, performing a civic service by and large, just making sure that people are able to vote. They have an ideological agenda. Let's make no bones about that. Let's not be fools about that. They have an ideological agenda, and they're trying to harvest as many votes as they possibly can through the certification of vulnerable voters. And this bill is going to go a long way to prevent that from occurring.
Yeah, and this one was one that Secretary of State Landry put in her win column. It passed the Senate and Governmental Affairs. It made it out of the Senate on a party line vote, no opposition in House and Governmental Affairs. And it passed the House 69-23 with 3 Democrats joining the Republicans in support. Familiar names by now, Roy Adams, Chad Brown, and Robbie Carter. This bill has been signed by the governor and will become effective on August 1st.
Good stuff.
Yeah. The next one by Senator Klein Peter is Senate Bill 218. And this is kind of a companion bill to the other. It puts similar parameters around who can help a voter in need of physical assistance with in-person voting.
Right, on election day. And basically the bill requires that a voter must sign something indicating in person at the polls that they are in need of assistance and that they have requested this assistance. The person providing the assistance must complete a form with all their identifying information. And interestingly, on that form, Danielle, they have to state whether or not they're being paid to provide that assistance. I think that's really, really important for reasons that came to light in the race with Jeremy Lacombe against, what was the name of the person that he ran against for state rep? I can't think of her name.
Tammy.
Fobb.
Oh, Tammy Fobb. You're right.
Tammy Fobb. Yeah. So there were some issues with that going on. So I think that requiring someone who's assisting in person at the polls, someone to vote, to sign something verifying whether they're being paid is very important. Again, the voter has to indicate at the poll that they're requiring assistance. and that's in person. There's also a provision about applications by mail in this legislation as well that says that no person except an immediate family member of a voter can send more than one ballot application, marked application ballot in. So when you're dealing with a significant group of family members, any more than one ballot, it has to be a family member that assists other family members or relatives in that process who may be vulnerable. And the last important provision of this bill is that nobody, no person, no organization can distribute any application form for an absentee vote, a ballot, unless requested by the person. Do you remember where we had all of the ballot harvesting and they were sending out ballots all over the place in other states, not necessarily here in Louisiana, whether they were requested or not? This bill will require in order to send a ballot to a person or an application for an absentee ballot to a person, they must have made a specific request for that ballot. I think that's an important provision of the bill too.
Yeah, and back to your point about the in-person voting and, one person can help one person, but that one person can't help a busload of individuals, right? So you can't just go through a neighborhood, pick up a bunch of people and say, look, guys, we're going to go vote today, and have basically the bus driver or one designated person go in the booth with all those people and press the button for them.
Exactly. With 50, 60, 70 people who've been brought over there on a bus. That is very important. And this will significantly restrict, if not completely eliminate, that practice. So I think SB 218 is a very important piece of legislation by Senator Klein, Peter.
Yep. And Secretary of State Nancy Landry agrees with that. This was on her win list. It passed Senate and Governmental Affairs on party line votes, made it through the Senate on party line votes. House and Governmental Affairs voted it out of committee on party line. And the House floor, same story, 68-29 party line vote. This was signed by the governor, and it does not become effective, interestingly, until January 1st, 2025. I'd love to know why.
I don't quite understand that at all. Why is this not a process that would be in effect for the fall elections coming up? I don't understand it. It doesn't look like the requirements of the bill are so onerous that these provisions could not be in place and enforced by the fall elections. I don't understand it. And that's not, and we'll get to this later, this is not the only item of legislation that is delayed in its implementation and enforcement. There are other items of legislation as well.
Exactly. You were stealing my thunder. There's a couple bills here that we're going to get into just now that you will be asking the same exact question. I will be asking the same exact question. The listeners will be asking the same exact question. And I think you should be asking the same exact question, frankly, because I think that we need to be reaching out to Secretary of State Nancy Landry's office and really strongly encouraging them to make some of this stuff happen before the November election.
Because I don't think, Danielle, even though the provisions of this bill and other bills that we'll talk about today provide that they will become enforceable and implementable in 2025, I don't know that that prohibits or restricts the Secretary of State, based upon her inherent administrative authority, from moving forward on them sooner than that. So I think with some encouragement and some healthy pressure, perhaps she will be willing to move forward earlier, unless there is a reason why the implementation of these bills are delayed. And I don't know what it is.
Look, if there's a reason, I'd love to know what it is. And I would love for us to redirect funds to make it possible, because as we know, most problems in government can be fixed with money.
Most problems can be fixed with money. And if there's ever a problem that's worthy of having money go to fix it, it's the integrity and the security of our election system.
That's right. Okay, so next up is House Bill 114 by Representative Les Farnham. He brought this bill last year. It's an annual supplemental canvass of registered voters. This one was also on Nancy Landry's list.
And it's estimated, Danielle, by third parties that there's 5, 6, 700,000 perhaps individuals on the registered voter rolls in Louisiana who simply do not belong there, who shouldn't be there. either because they've passed away or because they've moved or because they no longer live in the parish where they originally registered, but they don't belong on our voter rolls. This supplemental annual canvass would go through and make those final determinations about who does or does not belong on our voter rolls. So it's very, very good, because when you have that hundreds of thousands of people on your voter rolls who don't belong there, it is a recipe for fraud. It is a recipe for shenanigans and the manipulation of our voting system. And so we can't have that. We can't have hundreds of thousands of people on our voter rolls who don't belong there. This is a very good piece of legislation. Unfortunately, this legislation also, I believe, at the behest of the Secretary of State, will not become enforceable until 2025. I don't know if it's January or March of 2025, but I don't understand why this process would not be moving forward with greater urgency in light of the critical elections coming up this fall.
Yeah. Well, it's March 31st, 2025, which is about 6 months too late. And, you and I were discussing, but when we had Mark Cook come on the show, he talked about the need to just basically clear out the voter rolls and start over. Actually, it may not have been Mark. It may have been Tina Peters that said that. Regardless, I think it's a brilliant idea. Why don't we just clear them out and start again? I mean, at some point, it's too dirty to clean.
Well, that would be certainly a clean way to do it. There's no question about that. A very clean way to do it. But if they're not going to do it that way, they should at least begin this vigorous process of this supplemental annual canvass and cleaning the voter rolls well in advance of the fall elections. And I cannot for the life of me understand why this process would be delayed.
Yeah. Agreed. It passed House and Governmental Affairs 8-6 with, it looks like it's a party line vote, 73-30 in the House, with Roy Adams and Chad Brown voting with the Republicans. The Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee voted it 5-1 on party lines and passed the Senate on strict party lines. This one, like we said, not effective until March 31st, 2025, far, far too late. And the governor's already signed it.
Yeah, and we did everything we could to get this implemental and made effective before then, but the Secretary of State's will prevailed on this.
Yeah, as it did on the next one, which is Senate Bill 436 by Senator Facey, and it is his requirement for proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. We had him on the show to talk about it. I think he was very clear on the importance that he puts on this and his will to have it enacted before January of 2025, when it's actually going to be effective. This was on Nancy Landry's list of bills that she is proud of. However, it's not going to have much meaning for this election unless, like you said, unless she's working behind the scenes to try and get this done before then, which she may be. She may be. But if she was, I would really love for her to be conveying that to the public, because it would certainly encourage people and make people feel more comfortable about the direction of our elections.
Yeah, and it certainly is possible that she's trying to make this become effective before 2025. It is possible. It's a very good bill by Senator Facey, simply requiring some form of proof of citizenship before being allowed to register to vote in Louisiana. The Constitution from 2022, there's a constitutional amendment from 2022, Danielle, that requires people to be U.S. citizens in order to be able to vote. But this requires presentation of proof of citizenship upon trying to register to vote. So it's a very, very important bill in light of the current political climate. Again, don't understand why this process would not begin in advance of the fall elections, but we are seeking answers to that question, and perhaps pursuant again to the Secretary's administrative authority, she can do something to move this process forward sooner. It's so very, very important. This may be the most, or certainly one of the most important election bills of the session, if not in the history of the state, to require proof of citizenship before being allowed to register to vote in Louisiana. We've got to get this implemented before 2025 if in any way possible.
Yeah. And like you said, Chris, it provides the mechanism to be able to enforce the rule, right? I mean, you have the rule, but there's no mechanism for enforcement. It's not very useful.
Well, exactly. I mean, if a constitution says you got to be a citizen to vote, but there's no election officials that are being required to receive the verification of citizenship when someone tries to register, well, then it's basically meaningless. So that's
Yeah.
why 436 is important. Hopefully, we can get something moving on that before 2025.
Yep, it passed both parts of the Senate and Governmental Affairs on party lines, and the full Senate on party lines. House and Governmental Affairs passed it unanimously in an 11-0 vote with Democrats Delisha Boyd, Ed Larvadain, Rodney Lyons, and Candace Newell joining the Republicans. However, it passed the House on strict party lines. That continues to be a head scratcher for me, how, they flip flop between they were very convinced when they had people in front of them testifying, explaining the importance of it, and then they must have gotten the party memo and switched back over to opposition when they got to the House floor. But anyway, they passed the House on party lines 68-26, and the governor has signed it. It's not effective, as we said, until January 1st, 2025, which is unfortunately way too late. Way
Good
too late.
bill.
It should be effective as of now, really. It should be.
Yes.
People are registering to vote now.
Very good bill, needs earlier execution.
Yeah. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. All right, next up, Senate Bill 420 by Senator Valerie Hodges. And this one we followed very closely, as we did a lot of these, and it creates the crime of election fraud or forgery.
Anybody who attempts under false pretexts to register to vote or to vote in Louisiana, one example, lying about your citizenship status on a registration application is a crime now, subject to arrest, criminal prosecution, and imprisonment. And I think, again, in light of the political climate that we face now, where we know that there will be people who are not legally entitled to vote in Louisiana will be attempting to do so, I think that having a criminal penalty hanging over their head if they make that effort should serve as some deterrent to that effect. And it's very important bill, SB 420, Valerie Hodges.
Yeah, it passed Senate Judiciary 4-1 on party lines. This election integrity must be a very party-driven issue because it seems that most things are slicing on party lines. The Senate voted 27-11 on party lines. House and Governmental Affairs was 6-1 with Roy Adams joining the Republicans. And then yet again, a party line vote on the House floor, 69-29. This one was signed by the governor and becomes effective on August 1st.
Yes. Before we move on, Danielle, the point you just made about these election integrity bills tend to live or die based on party lines. I think part of the reason for that is that Democrats tend to view any restrictions or any standards of accountability when it comes to voting as an effort to disenfranchise vulnerable voters. At least that's the way that they portray it, the way that they sell it. But I think more on a more political plane, I think they realize that in a country and in a state that is majority Republican, most of the people who would be voting, perhaps illicitly, would be voting for Democrats. And so they, I think, look upon it as a threat to a potential broadening of the Democrat voter base. And I think that that is probably part of the reason why they tend to impose these bills that impose what really are very reasonable standards and restrictions on voting.
But you know what? This is what the news tells people to believe, right? The news reinforces what people want to believe. So CNN, if you believe still in mainstream media, which I know very few of our listeners probably do, but if you are a mainstream media viewer, CNN, MSNBC is going to tell you that exactly what you said, anything that disenfranchises, any restriction on voting whatsoever disenfranchises vulnerable voters. Requirement for voter ID, that's disenfranchisement. Now, if you're watching maybe Fox News, if you're listening to some other, more right-leaning news outlet that's still mainstream, they will tell you just the opposite of that. So I don't necessarily think that this is a party issue. Really, if we're being sincere, cleaning up our elections, making sure that one person gets one vote and it gets counted appropriately in the right amount of time, that is something that we should all, as American citizens, all as a voting public, want. However, the public narrative around this, the media narrative, has told us what to think. And I think that's what we're finding with our listeners. That's what we're starting to see, as more and more Democrats break for Trump. I think we're starting to see that the veneer of this us versus them break off. This has never really been Democrat versus Republican. It has always been establishment versus the peasants versus we the people. It's been about the elite trying to take something from us without us realizing that they're taking it. That's what it's been about.
Absolutely. I think that's such a great point. And I think one of the things that is driving, as it relates to election integrity, one of the issues that is driving Democrats, good, thoughtful Democrats, away from the National Democrat Party into the Republican column is the idea that Democrats in the U.S. Congress and in the U.S. Senate are opposing a requirement for American citizenship to be able to vote in federal elections. I don't know many Democrats who, if I were to sit down and ask them, do you think it should be a requirement when you go vote in an American election that you should be able to have to provide proof that you are in fact a U.S. citizen? I would say all of them would say absolutely that should be a requirement. Yet the National Democrat Party and the U.S. Congress, Democrats in the U.S. Congress, Democrats in the U.S. Senate oppose that. That to me is a massively important fact that people should know. Not just Republicans, not just Democrats, all Americans should know that they are opposing that. Why would they oppose that?
Yeah. And Chris, I'll disagree with you a little bit on that and say, I don't think Democrats are breaking with the Democratic Party and moving into the Republican column. I think they're breaking with the Democratic Party and moving into the Trump column. I think
That's well said.
the Republican
Yeah.
column is broken as well. And I don't think that we need to be giving Republicans any credit for being Republicans, because
Yes.
you know as well as I do, as many of our listeners know, that the uniparty is a real thing. It is an
Yes.
absolutely real thing, and it has been hamstringing the will of the people for decades. And the
Yes.
fact that we're all waking up to it together is what's really going to put us in unity as we the people, as a group of citizens who are activated and awake.
Yes. And that's such a good point, Danielle. They are not breaking, you're right, into the Republican column. They're breaking into the Trump column because there are almost as many people in the Republican Party, the traditional establishment Republican Party, who have attacked and undermined and tried to kneecap Trump as there are in the Democrat Party. Exactly. They're breaking for Trump. They're breaking for truth. They're breaking for a return to accountability. You're exactly right. And I did not intend to give the Republican Party undue credit there. So I have to engage in a full-scale retraction.
That's right. if I'm around watching, you're never going to be able to give the Republicans full credit for anything.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Next up, Senate Bill 101 by Senator Blake Miguez, who brought some seriously strong legislation this session. This is his bill that bans ranked choice voting and instant runoff voting, and that is hugely, hugely important.
Yes, and it's very, very important because under ranked choice voting, where you go in and okay, this is my first choice, this is my second choice, this is my third choice, this is my fourth choice, you're basically required to vote for a candidate that you don't like, that you don't want to vote for. Like they're having to make a third or a fourth choice when they would never, if they didn't have to do that, ever vote for that candidate. Under the First Amendment, you have a right to vote for the candidate that you choose to vote for, and you should not have to vote for any candidate that you don't want to vote for. It goes to the freedom of your vote is what it comes down to. It's a violation of the Constitution to ever have to vote for someone you don't want. We should be one man, one person, one vote. Ranked choice voting, just to give you an example of what it did, Danielle, and you know this, it allows candidates who only a minority of voters elected as their first choice to be elected. And it happened in Alaska, a heavily Republican state that elected a Democrat for a very major office there simply because they were going through and counting second and third and fourth choices. 60%, 65% of the voters in Alaska are Republican, and a Democrat ends up winning. That's what ranked choice voting will get you. We have one man, one person, one vote. And that's the way our system should be. And I'm so glad that this ranked choice voting bill by Senator Miguez will prohibit ranked choice voting in Louisiana.
Yeah, and Chris, you and I were both at the We the People Bayou community meeting this past Thursday, and you were on the panel, as was Senator Miguez. And when he described this, I hadn't really thought about the fact that this creates a lot of spoiled ballots, because if you have an office, like for instance, in Terrebonne Parish this past October, we had 10, maybe 9, 10 candidates for parish president. So imagine you have to rank all of those. Well, you get to number 3 and you're like, oh, darn, I actually meant to put them as number 4. Well, if you just scratch it out and try and fix it on the ballot, that is a spoiled ballot. So he was saying that there are hundreds of thousands of ballots that can get considered spoiled, and they are not counted because you're making people do this stupid, absolutely ridiculous act of ranking people whenever there is only one office. There's one office. Just put the one person for the one office. It's not hard.
And do it and let the best person win. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. All right. Well, this one passed on party line votes with Cleo Fields and Sam Jenkins joining the Republicans in the Senate. House and Governmental Affairs voted it 8-1 with Ed Larvadane joining the Republicans in the committee. The full House voted 74-22 with a couple of Democrats joining: Roy Adams, Marcus Bryant, Robbie Carter, Adrian Fisher, and Stephen Jackson joined the Republicans in favor of this bill. It was signed by the governor on May 28th and became effective immediately. I guess that's an easy one to implement if it just means staying the same.
Yeah. Did you say, you may have said this, was this one of Secretary Landry's package?
I did not. Well, I can't remember if I said it or not, but it was one that she put in her win column.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, next up is House Bill 962 by Representative Beth Billings. This was related to absentee mail and early voting ballots, related to their preparation, verification, tabulation, and counting. This one was not in Nancy Landry's list, Chris.
Yeah, no, but it required the number of votes, quorum that's required for the local board of election supervisors to take action on early and absentee ballots and votings, and the action that those boards take. That was essentially what the bill began as, which was a very good bill, really sort of an innocuous bill. But they added an amendment later on that prohibited any real-time recording of any of the processes that the local board of election supervisors engage in with regard to the counting, the processing of these early and absentee votes. We thought that was not a good idea. We thought that there should be some mechanism of recordation there. And I believe it was Senator Miguez who was able to amend the amendment that the Secretary of State put on there that now allows recording of those processes, the local Board of Election Supervisors meetings, through a camera that I guess can be situated in the top corner of the room or wherever they're working. And if there's a challenge or if anybody wants to know and see what occurred there, that can happen. Now, this is not mandated under the law, but it's not prohibited. So the Secretary of State, under her administrative authority, perhaps with some healthy pressure from Louisiana citizens, may implement that simple recordation device, which is not really expensive to implement in the local Board of Election Supervisors offices.
Yeah, and we have to give credit where credit is due on this one, Chris. The eagle eye of Mr. Burt Cauley, a faithful LACAG member and a warrior down at the legislature, he saw this bill, he tracked this bill, and he fought passionately on it. So thank you, Burt, for keeping your eye out on this and for bringing us in, making us aware of this bill.
So glad you brought that up, because without Burt Cauley, there would not even be the possibility of having any real-time recordation of these critically important processes by the election supervisors. So I'm so thankful for Burt.
Yeah, cheers to you, Burt. And this one was signed by the governor on June 19th and becomes effective on August 1st. Okay, next up. This is last in our the list of bills that we followed, but there's a couple more that we want to track for you all that Secretary Landry put in her win column. But the last one up for us was House Bill 856 by Representative Mike Johnson. This was a simple bill that just said very innocuously that the Secretary of State should be responsible for voting system maintenance and repair. Of course, if you have followed us at all this session, especially toward the end, you will know that that is not what this bill ended up as. And you will probably have been very active in making sure that Representative Johnson, Senator Reese, and many others were aware of your displeasure and how it ended up. But Chris, give us the rundown, remind us what happened on this bill and how it shook out.
Very, very innocuously, as you said, it began just saying the Secretary of State's responsible for the maintenance of the voting system. It passes through the House committee, House floor, passes through the Senate committee, gets to the Senate floor for final passage. And at the 11th hour, Senator Mike Reese adds about 4 pages of amendments to this bill that would have basically eviscerated the oversight authority of the legislature when it comes to the certification and bidding of our election machines. It would have done away with the requirement that independent cybersecurity experts vet and examine any proposed election system. It would have undermined the approval of the Attorney General, who would have to look at it and make sure the certification process complied with law. The bill essentially would have placed plenary and unilateral, basically unchecked authority in the Secretary of State when it comes to choosing our next election system and how that is run and maintained. We thought it was terrible that those amendments would be put on there, particularly at the 11th hour when nobody was allowed to vet them. But it passed in the Senate, Danielle. Those amendments passed and then went back over to the House for concurrence. And that's when LACAG and other groups cranked it up and sent hundreds and hundreds of communications and emails saying, this cannot go through, this cannot pass. People worked way too hard to put the protocols in place governing our election system as they exist currently, and you're not going to eviscerate this in the 11th hour, an underhanded move on the Senate floor. So Representative Johnson ended up basically, I believe, burying this in concurrence, conference committee, never called it for a vote on the House floor for concurrence, and the bill ultimately died. But I have to applaud Representative Johnson for responding in a way that was very receptive. He understood exactly what all the concerns were. And frankly, Danielle, I don't know that Representative Johnson anticipated having these amendments placed on there on the Senate side on his bill. I really don't think he did.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of instances that happened this session where people were surprised by amendments that got put on their bill. So there's no reason we would have to believe that Representative Johnson was expecting this whenever it seemed like just a very simple technical fix to make sure that Secretary of State's responsibilities were very clear in law.
And I want to give a shout out to all the LACAG members, We the People members, everybody who reached out and made their feelings known on this,
Yeah.
because it is just so very important that our election system be properly vetted before we spend 120, 130, $100 billion, whatever it is, investing in a new voting system.
Yeah. And there were at least hundreds, but I believe thousands of emails that were sent to get this bill stopped. So it was a huge outcry from people. And that's because people can see that our elections are at risk. Our election system is extremely vulnerable. And so just so appreciative that there's a huge amount of unity to get that crazy amendment stopped.
Absolutely. I was just so happy because we had to do it at the 11th hour, Danielle. We didn't have a lot of much time, but it just goes to show that LACAG and other groups working together have the ability to move quickly and with great effectiveness when it's necessary on very important legislation.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's a couple bills, as I mentioned, that were on Secretary Landry's win column that we wanted to make sure to review. The first one is House Bill 285 by Representative Mark Wright, and it creates the Division of Election Integrity. And this is a very interesting one to me, Chris, because as far as I'm concerned, there were some measures that could be taken that would do a lot more for election integrity than creating a bureaucratic office in the Secretary of State's, a bureaucratic division in the Secretary of State's office. I would prefer to see real action rather than the setting up of an office, which anyone who's been in corporate America, anyone who's worked in government, anyone who basically can see that this is, look, I'm not saying that there's ill intent around this or no intent around this. All I'm saying is there are plenty of opportunities to do things for election integrity that don't involve more bureaucrats.
Exactly. I don't think we need the creation of another bureaucratic entity in Louisiana called the Division of Election Integrity. I think the Secretary of State has all the statutory authority that she needs in order to ensure we have election integrity. I think the clerks of court, the registrar of voters, we have laws in place that govern election integrity. I'm just not sure what the purpose is of creating another bureaucracy that probably will end up being laden with red tape and may end up just being a drain on taxpayers while really accomplishing very little. So I don't know what this bill, I just don't understand the need for it, quite frankly. And Representative Mark Wright is a good rep. I think he's done some good things, but I just don't understand the need for this legislation. We do not need more bureaucracy in Louisiana. We need effective, consistent enforcement of our current election laws, and we need a few but very important fundamental reforms to our election system. We don't need a division of election integrity to tell us what that is.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But it was signed on May 24th and becomes effective on August 1st.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Next up, House Bill 449 by Representative Michael Mellerin. This one requires the courts to send all judgments of interdiction to the registrars of voters. Chris, translate that for us.
That basically means that if a Louisiana citizen is interdicted, that basically means that citizen has been judged incapable of administering their own affairs, incapable of living independently or having any degree of self-sufficiency, and therefore they don't have the legal capacity to vote. And if they don't have the legal capacity to vote through a judgment of interdiction, then that fact needs to be delivered to the registrar of voters so that the registrar of voters can take them off the voter rolls and ensure that no one perhaps attempts to vote in their place, or just letting them know this individual does not have the legal capacity to vote. I don't know how many interdictions occur, Danielle, in Louisiana during a given year. I don't think it's too many, but when it does occur, it's important that the registrar of voter know when that occurs so that they can act accordingly.
Yeah. This one was signed May 8th and becomes effective August 1st. And Chris, I really liked your point on that. Perhaps I can't think that if people are deemed incapable of being able to vote for whatever reason, that they're not probably going to go out and vote, but
Right.
but perhaps it's an opportunity for fraud. So
It's an opportunity for fraud.
appreciate plugging the holes wherever we find them. All right.
Absolutely.
Next up is House Bill 476 by Representative Josh Carlson, and this one is related to the delivery of absentee ballots.
Yep. And it just says that no person except an immediate family member of a voter can submit by any means or send for delivery by the U.S. Postal Service or any commercial courier more than one marked ballot per election to the registrar. So again, if you want to help somebody out and help them vote, then you have to fulfill all the other requirements, and you can send that in on their behalf, but only one. And only immediate family members of vulnerable voters can send in more than one. And again, that sort of complements some of the other legislation that was passed to ensure that the third party groups are not sort of dragooning vulnerable voters across the state to get them to register, apply the way they want them to, and vote the way they want them to. So this is an important piece of legislation, again, that complements other items of legislation related to absentee ballots.
Yeah, and it has been signed and it is effective on August 1st. The next two are by Representative Polly Thomas. The first one is House Bill 506, and it restricts voter registration drives and the collection of registration applications. This is a really important one.
This is a very important one because, again, third-party organizations that engage in these voter registration drives, they're very often not doing it simply for civic reasons. They're not doing it simply to ensure that everybody has access to the ballot. They're doing it for ideological reasons so that people will apply and vote the way they want them to. So what this bill will do, it will require any third-party voter drive organization to register with the Secretary of State formally. And in that registration, they have to acknowledge the offenses related and the regulations related to voter registration drives and the activities that they can engage in and are prohibited from engaging in. And so it makes very clear that not only have to register, but make sure they understand fully what the parameters are within which they have to operate. Now, importantly, Danielle, this bill does not apply to the electronic voter application as long as all the third party is doing is providing the electronic voter application to the potential voter, and no more. No identifying information, no pressure to vote for anybody, any candidate, one candidate, no pressure to register as a Democrat or Republican, whatever. All they can do is simply provide a ballot for someone who requests it electronically, and that is it. They could do nothing else.
An application.
An application. Yes.
Got it. Yeah. So basically, they can give them the link or open the link, but they can't do anything more than that.
That is it.
Okay. The last one is House Bill 581, also by Polly Thomas, and this one is related to witnessing election documents.
Yeah, it just says that anybody any document that's required to be witnessed by the Secretary of State on an election document, the witness has to be 18. And any witness who signs an absentee by mail certificate, as required by law, has to include their mailing address on the application or on the certification. And again, for the third or the fourth time, no person can witness more than one certificate of a voter who is not an immediate family member. Arguably, this was covered in Senator Klein Peters' legislation, but it's here nonetheless again and again. I guess it can't hurt to have it in there more than one time.
We
No
could be doing something else that moves the needle, but let's keep hitting the hammer on this one.
Let's keep hitting the hammer on this one. This is not a bad piece of legislation.
No.
Just requires that no person can witness more than one certificate of a voter who's not an immediate family member. They're trying to encourage through all this legislation, Danielle, simply to have family members who presumably know, trust, and have close caring relationships with these vulnerable voters to be the ones who are assisting them in the voting process, in the application and registration process, and not third party groups coming in to manipulate them. That's what all of this election integrity legislation related to the early, to the absentee, and even in the in-person voting is what it's designed to do.
Yeah. And that rounds out, Chris, not only our election related summary, but also the whole entire series, the wrap up series, the series we thought could be 2 or 3 episodes that somehow morphed into 6 episodes. We finally are closing that out. I'm really looking forward. Well, one, we have a lot to be proud of. We have so much to be proud of. As much as we really give, bad legislation a hard time, as much as we really crack on people for the way they vote and really, shine a light on that. We are really proud and so pleased with the direction that this legislature has taken in the last 6 months.
And I'm so proud of the way that LACAG has grown, how we've demonstrated that we have the ability to come together in coordination with other groups to really make a difference. If there's one thing that this session has really brought home to me, Danielle, is that relentless, consistent grassroots advocacy, when people are working together in harmony, works. It always works. It doesn't always work perfectly, but it's almost always effective when it's done well and done consistently. It has rejuvenated my faith in grassroots advocacy, and I'm so much looking forward to continuing to grow with LACAG, to continuing to build our organization so that we can be even more effective next session. And we will have a lot to work on next session as well as in every session. And I'm just looking forward in the off season to continuing to grow, continuing to hone our skills, our infrastructure, and our approach. And I think that we're going to have a great 2025 session.
Yeah. Well, before we can even think about the 2025 session, I have my thoughts focused on what are we going to be talking about on the podcast next? Who are our guests going to be? So some things just for our listeners, maybe a couple housekeeping notes. One is if you are a subscriber to us on YouTube, please subscribe to us somewhere else as a backup because we're not putting everything on YouTube. We've been kicked off twice. We're trying to mind our P's and Q's over on YouTube to keep it there as much as we can, but we're not going to put all the content on there because they are censoring us and because they are suspending us from time to time. So in order to keep our channel active, we're going to be self-censoring, which I hate, but we are always on Rumble. So if you would subscribe to us on Rumble or Spotify or somewhere else just to have a backup, if you feel like you haven't heard from us a while on YouTube, just check one of those other platforms because we are putting out episodes pretty much 3 days a week right now. So, and that may ramp up or it may ramp down a little bit during the summer season, but I think we'll probably keep it pretty steady at 3. So if you are not hearing from us and you're a YouTube subscriber, it's probably because we are not putting it on YouTube to protect our account. The other thing I want to mention is that we will be talking a lot about election integrity going forward. We expect to have some pretty exciting guests on coming up soon. So just stay tuned for that because we want to talk to some national experts. We also want to talk to some statewide folks like the Commissioner of Insurance again and see how he feels the session worked out for him in his office. To talk to Liz Murrell, who brought the Title IX alongside Cade Brumley, the challenge to Title IX. Maybe talk to Joe Donahue again or John Fleming and see, how did this legislative session stack up against their wish list?
Yeah, it's so important. And for people to be able to hear and have exposure to these great guests and to the truth that we're putting out. It is so important that you continue to share and subscribe to State of Freedom. Share it with 5 friends. Share it with a sister, a brother, uncle, whoever. Share, subscribe, and continue to expand, because we're not going to stop until the State of Freedom is heard in every nook and cranny of the state of Louisiana. And we are getting there day by day, Danielle, day by day.
We are, and beyond, and beyond. If you are looking for a way to support the State of Freedom and LACAG, visit our websites. They're freedomstate.us and lacag.org. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from you about what you want to hear from us, what kind of guests you'd like to see on the show, what you like, what you don't like. And we'd also love it if you would support us, especially with a monthly recurring donation, because it just helps us budget a lot easier. So anyway, any support you can give us helps us to keep doing what we're doing, because we can't do it without you.
We need your support. We need your help, your prayers, your financial support. And with that, Danielle, we will march each and every day relentlessly to preserve the great state of freedom in Louisiana.
Amen. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom, LLC, at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.